So, navigating difficult conversations is a part of every business. And the thing is, when you think about navigating difficult conversations, there are some obvious costs with it. There's delays of time. But there's also the fact that you can lose a lot of customers, you can lose a lot of employees because you're not able to navigate these conversations well. And I want to start by talking about a little bit of the psychology of it. So normally, the way we respond to things in our life is someone says or does something. There's space to make an intentional decision, and we respond. So reality is, a lot of times we don't take this. We don't put space in between someone says or does something and we respond. It happens in an instant. And if we haven't informed our intuition through practice and work, then oftentimes that immediate response is not going to be helpful. It's not going to be helpful. It's not going to produce the outcomes that you want. And so really, honestly, the number one step in navigating a difficult conversation better or well is to start by creating an intentional space in between what someone says or does and the response that we make. One of those barriers that we place that can make it so difficult to navigate these conversations are the labels that we place on ourselves. So we limit our ability to make appropriate changes through the labels that we give. And when we give those labels, we are encouraging ourselves to behave in ways that reinforce those labels. They block our ability to grow. So here are some of those unhealthy labels. I'm not a good listener. I'm sure you've heard people say before, I am not a good listener. And the way that statement comes out is, this is a truth now, and it will always be a truth about who I am, that I am not a good listener. I get mad easily is another one of those. I'm not touchy-feely. I get so defensive. And finally, I'm so impatient. I think one of the things that happens is that when we imagine someone who is touchy-feely, someone who doesn't get defensive, someone who doesn't get mad easily, we have this image in our mind of a person who is able to do that perfectly. And that's what we think we need to be able to attain in order to make a change. And what I want to suggest is that is not the case at all. What we can do is we can move in that direction. And by moving in that direction of becoming someone who can handle emotions more effectively, who isn't triggered to become angry so quickly, by doing that, we are able to create much better outcomes in those situations. We are able to place ourselves emotionally and psychologically in a place that can lead to success. So, what if we release those labels and replace them with something healthier? I can fully focus on the person who is speaking. I can do the things that help me to act pleasantly. I can choose to engage emotionally. I can hold my value inside of me and not let someone else's opinion dictate it. And I can act in patient ways. So by replacing those inhibiting labels and replacing them with something that is more empowering, then it sets the framework for us to be able to move forward. So one of the biggest tools that I like to teach in this area is upfront agreements. Upfront agreements are basically walking into a conversation that you know is going to be difficult and setting parameters on it in advance that provide a whole host of benefits, including encouraging greater investment by the two people that are involved. So let me give an example for this. You know that you need to have a conversation with one of your employees. This has been an ongoing issue, and based on your experience with that person, you're anticipating it might get heated. So these upfront agreements help to lower the temperature and increase the likelihood that you're going to have the outcomes that you're looking for. Second, it creates shared expectations of what's going to happen. It establishes accountability and boundaries, and offers a safe way to exit the conversation if needed. Here are some things that you can include in those upfront agreements. What's the purpose? Is it okay to even have the conversation? How long will it be? What are the expectations about listening, and how to exit the conversation if needed? So let me pause and give you an example real quick. Hey Chris, I know that we have needed to have this conversation a while for the way that you've been working through your relationships with some of the folks that we're trying to get as clients here. And I know that this is something that we need to deal with together. So the purpose of our conversation isn't for me to come to you and tell you everything that you've done wrong and replace it with everything I think you should do. Actually, what the purpose of this is to create a space where you can share with me what your experience is. Help me to understand your perspective. And I'm going to make it a point as we're having this conversation to listen really well and even restate back to you what I think it is you're saying. And at the end, when you feel like you fully communicated, then what I'll do, with your permission, is I'm going to offer some ideas. Okay, so quick pause. I know that some business owners hear that and they're like, with your permission, we need to have this conversation. So there can certainly be parameters on that. It can be like, if we can't have that conversation right now, we're going to need to have it within a couple of days. But what I want to suggest is by stating the purpose and giving some expectations and giving them the opportunity to decide or not, you're dramatically increasing their investment in the conversation. If their defenses are all up and they're convinced that you're going to fire them or you're going to tell them how awful they did and they haven't bought into this conversation, the likelihood of them making changes diminishes a lot. So, is it okay to have the conversation? I also know Chris is a busy man, so I might say to him, hey Chris, just so you know up front, this is probably going to be like a 15, 30-minute conversation. Is that something that you can build into your day?
Yes.
Okay. Listening expectations, just like I said before, setting expectations about the fact that I am not going to be interjecting at first. I'm going to be all about hearing what you have to say so that you feel fully heard. Again, lowering the temperature, increasing the likelihood that Chris might hear what I have to say, and I'm also hearing as well. Okay, let's don't miss the last one because that is so super important. Okay, Chris, so I know that this conversation may not be easy. And if you feel that you need to exit this conversation right now, yeah, you need to step away for the moment because it's not something that you're ready to handle. I give you permission to do that. We will need to follow up soon. We'll need to schedule a time within the next day or so. But I want to give you the space to do that. Is it okay if I do the same, if I feel the conversation isn't going in a good direction?
Yes.
Yeah. So we walk through each of those steps on the front end. One of the things that I offered, thank you, Chris. One of the things that I offered at the beginning is that it gives us some accountability in the conversation. So let's say you've gotten to this point, listening expectations. And I say, I'm going to listen first, make sure I understand, then I'm asking if you'll let me do the same. Normal human nature, you've listened, now it's your turn to speak, and they say, hold on, I've got something to say there, or they just interject themselves. With the right tone and the right attitude, you can say to them, hey, I totally get it, you're passionate about this. This relates to you and your interactions here in this business. But we agreed on the front end that you would wait until I've had an opportunity to speak, and then you would respond. Can you do that? So you've created those parameters up front. And we all know this as business owners about the importance of having upfront agreements in sales. We all know this. If you're going to cover cost with a client, you cover it at the time that they're most interested, which is generally when they reach out to you the first time. You create expectations about what service you're going to be able to offer, what prices you're going to be able to do, because you're setting boundaries on what your business relationship is going to look like. What I'm suggesting is, if you modify that to a conversation in the relationships, it can have similar benefits. So here's a model of what it would be like, and I'm not going to go through all these, but this is just an example of what the conversation could look like. With any skill, creating upfront agreements isn't something that you're going to walk out of a workshop and be a master at. But what it is a tool that if you practice it consistently and create your own style within these parameters, you can turn it into a tool that will transform those relationships. I don't like, in the workshops that I lead, to tell folks that they're going to come out with an easy solution. What I do say is that they're worth putting in the time and effort, and their dreams are worth putting in the time and effort to find tools that actually work. We all know that in relationships, if you want to build a good relationship, there are no magic words that you can say to heal conflicts and make a relationship great. But there are things that you can invest in intentionally over time that will create consistent results. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks for staying here. That means a lot.
Yeah.
I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is that...
When do you do the workshop? You know?